and Liz will start recording now. Welcome to Adult Services Scrutiny Performance Panel. And I'd like to put a welcome for the Child and Family Services Panel, or the Cabinet members, and Kelly Gillins. Welcome. Okay, item number 1 is apologies and the roll call by Liz. Liz?
Okay. First off, Mandy Evans.
Here, Liz.
Joe Hale. Chris Holly.
Present.
Paxton Hood-Williams.
Present.
Yvonne Jardine.
Present.
Jeff Jones.
Yes, yeah.
Susan Jones.
Yes.
Erica Kirshner. Hazel Morris.
Yes.
Gloria Tanner. Tony Beddoe. And from the Child and Family Services panel, Cyril Anderson. Mike Day.
Yeah, here.
Kevin Griffiths. And Des Thomas.
Present. Yeah.
Okay, Clive Lloyd. Elliot King.
Afternoon, yes, I'm here.
Clive is there. He's muted.
Yeah, I got
Yeah, sorry,
Amy
I'm disconnected. I am here. Disconnected then.
Okay.
Sorry.
Amy Hawkins.
Yeah, here.
Kelly Gillings.
Hi, yes, I'm here.
Okay. Is there anyone else present that I haven't mentioned? Okay, thank you.
Me, Gloria Tanner.
Oh, okay, thanks very much.
Okay, I was a bit late.
Thank you. We go to item 2 now, declarations of personal and prejudicial interests. Anybody got anything to declare? Oh, Chris, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, my daughter works for social services, and I got dispensation to sit on the committee
Okay.
and vote.
I don't think Liz needs to send you a form for that because you've got dispensation.
Yeah.
Okay. Item 3, prohibition of whipped votes and declaration of party whips. Are there any? No. Okay. Minutes of the previous meeting. I'll go through them one page at a time. Okay, page 1. Page 2. Page 3. And that's on page 4, but there's only a little bit on page 4. Anybody got anything to raise? No. Liz, I know Tony had an item to raise, but it looks as if he's had a problem getting onto our meeting.
Yes, he's not present at the moment. Doesn't seem to be able to get on. Okay, maybe we can come back to that later if he's able to join the meeting. Just for him to raise that query.
Is that all right with you, Clive?
Yes, Chair. Liz has made me aware of the query, so I'm happy to pick that up. No problem at all. Anytime. Even if Tony doesn't join, you know, I think the request was that a response, more formal response at the next meeting. But I'm happy to touch on it today and then bring a more formal response to the next meeting.
Okay, that's smashing. Go on to public questions. Are there any, Liz?
No, no public questions.
Okay, item number 6 then. Welcome, Kelly Gillins. Can we ask you if you can do your presentation in 2 halves and that we can ask questions at the end of the first half? So the first one is the update of West Glamorgan Transformation Programme. Is that okay with you, Kelly?
Yes, of course, there's no problem at all. Shall I present? Are you happy for me to present from my screen?
Yes, please.
No problem.
Can I remind you all to turn your mics off?
I'm hoping you can all see that. Yeah, brilliant. Unfortunately, I can't see any of you, so if there is any questions, if you could just let me know and speak up, that would be great. Okay, so as described, I'm going to present to you in two parts today. The first part is to update members on the impact of COVID-19 on the West Glamorgan Transformation Programme over the last year. And then part two is to update you on the implementation of the recommendations of the Welsh Audit Office that we received back in October 2018. So I will start with the first part of my presentation. So you'll be aware that obviously COVID came into our area, in particular during March 2020. And in order to respond to the emerging crisis, we needed to put some emergency arrangements in around the Regional Partnership Board. That was to facilitate effective and swift decision making. What we found was that the partnership working has been very effective right across the board on a range of levels and issues, basically because we already had good working practices in place within the regional partnership. So we had multiple people already working together on a range of topics and projects and programmes, and they just came together even more swiftly to deliver responses to the crisis as they were emerging at the time. So the strong commitment of partners to joint working and delivery had already improved the effectiveness of the Regional Partnership Board, but the change to the emergency governance arrangements to make swift decision making on issues that were identifying themselves as we went through the pandemic very early on was key to the success for our region. One thing that did cause us a bit of an issue right at the very beginning was co-production, because obviously if you're working in crisis and you're working very, very quickly, co-production is not always possible. However, I'm really pleased to say that co-production has now been, I want to say reintroduced is probably not quite the right word because it never went away, but it sort of, we've taken a new step forward with co-production, and our Regional Partnership Board recently endorsed the charter, the toolkit and the framework by which we'll deliver our programmes. And I know other partner organisations such as the CVS and East Talbot and the Health Board are actually taking those charters into their own organisations as well as a way of introducing co-production right through their operations. Stabilisation and reconstruction is the key bit of work for me moving forward, in that how do we now respond to the lessons that we've learned as a result of the pandemic. And we did start this piece of work back in September 2020. However, the second wave that we had over the Christmas has delayed and slowed things a little. Work has still continued to progress, but we have had to slow it a little, although I'm pleased to say we've started to re-establish all of that again now, and we're looking at how we make sure that we do things at the pace and speed at which the region would want us to moving forward. So the key priorities that we identified in September as a result of lessons learned was stabilisation and reconstruction. It speaks for itself. It's about how we work in the communities to improve and develop things further, learning the lessons we've learned from community situations where they helped each other through the pandemic, and how we can bottle that good work and continue it forward. Remodelling acute health and social health and community services, has a couple of work programmes that sits within it, and it's about effective support for individuals to live as independently as possible in their own home or wherever that home may be. So a part of our work is about trying to support individuals to stay at home as long as possible without having an acute health intervention, and then vice versa, when you have had to have an acute health intervention, that we are able to discharge you timely, effectively, with all the support that you need to enable you to return to your home as quickly and as safely as possible. The third priority then is transforming complex care. So you'll be aware there's been some issues around the learning disability services, mental health services, and how we reach agreement, how we transition children from children's services into adult social care. And there's a huge piece of work we're undertaking at the moment in order to reframe all the work we do under complex care in a joint partnership way, making sure that all the partners are involved through children's services all the way through to adult social care, including health colleagues as well, right across their directorates, because there's multiple directorates in there as well. The fourth priority is transforming mental health services. You'll be aware that we signed up to the mental health framework that was co-produced back in 2019, actually, was when we endorsed that programme of work. Unfortunately, as described, COVID has put some things, slowed some progress, but we decided the key priority for the regions clearly to deliver that framework and all of the objectives that were set within it. So a huge piece of work is ongoing at the moment in order to transform our mental health services. There are some other priorities emerging at the moment as well, and we're just working on that at the moment to see whether the priorities we've currently set ourselves lend themselves to those programmes of work, or whether we need to add more priorities to our remit. So engagement, right at the very start of the pandemic, we received some disappointment from our citizens and our carers in the way in which we were communicating with them. They didn't think we were communicating in an effective manner and in a timely manner around the region in terms of what we had to slow and what we had to pick up pace on and all of those sorts of things. I am really pleased to report that all of that has now been resolved. We are working very closely with all our partners, citizens and carers alike, and they are now involved in all the work streams that we have going on at the moment. We have representation through almost all of the organisation, now the governance organisation. So things have drastically improved. And in fact, I think we're now building better relationships than we had prior to the pandemic. Our partners have all been fantastically engaged. Everybody we've had to work with in order to deliver around the crisis, they've all been there, helping us, supporting us, and working effectively very well together, which is no mean feat considering the technology issues that we've had since the start of the pandemic. But it does go to show that the relationships that we've built through the RPB, through the Regional Partnership Board previously, have supported that work. In terms of the Regional Partnership Board, we have now met 3 times since the pandemic started. I'm pleased to say we only had to cancel 1 meeting, and that was in July of 2020. We then met in September, October and January. I'm saying that off the top of my head now. We have a further meeting booked for April. So we have now reinstigated those meetings. We always only met quarterly anyway, so missing 1 meeting was really down to the commitment of all the partner organisations. In terms of the Recovery Board, we actually stood that group up in September 2020 to deal with the 4 areas that I've just described, the 4 priority areas and the work streams that flow from underneath those. The frequency of those meetings has varied to support the pandemic. So we've had some Community Silver Command work meetings where during the height of the phases we met 3 times a week. We've now managed to stand that back down to once a week. And we have the interface meeting, the Health and Social Care interface meeting that met 3 times a week, and we now meet twice a week. So as we fluctuate the meetings to suit the priorities that are coming in and the issues that are facing us. Achievements since March 2020. So obviously our governance arrangements were needed to be very robust, and they were for us to make the swift decision making as I've already described. We've developed a number of protocols, and we continue to develop these protocols because now we have them. It's important that we continue them. It's not just for the pandemic. These will also stand the test of time moving forward. So around personal protective equipment, obviously the way in which you use that in care homes is really vital for any type of infectious disease that may enter the doors of a care home. It wasn't just for COVID that we needed it. The Care Homes Protocol brought together all of the guidance and all the legislation that was being issued by Welsh Government and put it into a format that the care homes could read, digest and understand, and any new updates would be fed to them via this protocol, and to give them a way of working and managing all of the messages that they were receiving. The Emergency Funding Protocol allowed us to, we sometimes have disputes over funding, whether who should pay for what, should it be health, should it be our local authority partners or somebody else. We decided to put an emergency funding protocol in place to alleviate any issues of dispute around funding, because we just wanted to provide individuals with service and make sure that they were timely discharged. We implemented the rapid discharge process, which was presented by Welsh Government during April 2020. I'm pleased to say we introduced that in July in our region. We were one of the first across Wales to actually implement the full process. That is still within our processes for discharging people out of hospitals we currently stands, but we currently undertaking a review of the hospital to home programme that we had, because essentially the rapid discharge process and the hospital to home programme are actually hand in hand. They don't supersede each other, they work together, and now we're just reviewing to see what are the key component parts of that we need to improve and progress and take forward, and which parts of that don't really work for us and they're not as effective as they can be. Apologies, my daughter has just arrived home, as you can hear, and my mum will swiftly take her off now. Joys of home working. And then finally, one of the key things that we've done is we've developed and implemented an integration escalation framework, which is a bit like the hospital systems, where they have a RAG status about where they are in their system. So you quite often hear that the hospitals are at level 3 or level 4. It's a similar thing, but that's for social care. So we've done one for our region, which takes into account the hospital situations and the community situations in terms of care homes, in terms of domiciliary care, workforce. Do we have enough staffing capacity? Are there lots of people off sick? And what that has helped us with is develop further tools to help us make sure that we don't ever end up in crisis. So over the Christmas period, this tool was instrumental in us setting up the care home support squad. So we had a number of people who were able and ready to go into the care homes should a crisis face a care home where they had a number of staff off ill with COVID or other things. We've also identified that we needed an infection prevention control support squad, including training for key members of staff as well. So the tool has helped us identify areas of practice where we need to improve or areas where we hadn't touched before, and has helped us develop new ways of working. So further on from that then, we've also got a care homes action plan. So you'll be aware that ministers from Welsh Government requested that we develop a care home action plan. We developed that during July. It's continuing to develop because as we find lessons, we are adding them to our care homes action plan. We are currently writing a report to the Minister for Friday, which tells where we are with the progress of us implementing the care home action plan. And there are things changing on a daily basis with the implementation of that. So it's going very well. We also created a website for care homes to put all the essential information that they needed in order to support their residents into one place. So as I described with the care homes protocol, similarly, they also needed access to the original guidance that came down from Welsh Government and access to any key tools around how to put PPE equipment on to the key guidance. So we've got a website where they can directly access all of that, and the feedback from care homes that has been very beneficial, having a single point of contact for them for any information they require. We're currently developing a regional plan for lateral flow testing, and a report was brought to Community Silver this morning actually on this point about how those devices are going to be used for social care staff. So I should be able to update further on that in the coming weeks if anybody wishes to have any information on that. And the vaccine programme we've also been part of, because we had to identify all the social care staff working in our care homes, in our supported living area, domiciliary care, to make sure that they were part of the vaccination programme, that they received their vaccinations in a timely manner. We are on target for meeting all the key priority groups, and now that's obviously extended to cohorts 1 to 9. So it also includes all our vulnerable citizens and our unpaid carers as well. As part of the recovery work, the Regional Partnership Board has recently endorsed, and within the last fortnight, the Regional Carer Strategy with a quick reference guide. So that work has continued despite the pandemic, despite our technology issues. We can't get in a room together to develop the strategic intent. So the Regional Carer Strategy has been very well developed using the tools that we have. And that's going to take us forward now over the next couple of years, where we'll now develop a framework to support that, to identify the key objectives of the things we want to deliver for carers and pay carers in the coming years. In addition to that, in response to the initial disappointment of not being involved in also the decision making in the early part of the pandemic, the Carers Partnership Board actually developed an emergency action planning toolkit to help statutory partners and third sector look at how they were going to change services as a result of the pandemic to help us think of carers in a different way when we were trying to when we needed to stand services down, or we needed to amend service delivery in order to support the crisis. The other thing they signed off, which is really important to us, is the co-production framework, toolkit and charter. We, as you know, as West Glamorgan, we really want to embed co-production into the development of our services all the way through to make sure that we got citizens and carers at the heart of everything that we do to make sure that our services are fit for purpose for them. So please say the RPB signed that off, and now that's being implemented across the whole programme, and we're taking that forward, as are other statutory partners too. And as I think I mentioned earlier, that we actually reviewing our hospital to home programme at the moment in light of the rapid discharge process that we implemented in July, so that we can refresh the programme and support the progression of the model. We believe the model is working, but we know there's always improvements to be made, so therefore sometimes an evaluation is a good thing to do. So lessons learned. So we learned some lessons, and we've done quite extensive work about the things that we know that we need to improve on, or things that we did really well. So our digital capability, our staff really rose to the challenge. I don't think we ever envisaged us doing all our meetings via Teams when we first were told to leave the civic buildings and go home, but it's worked. We've all managed to continue to progress the work. And that's fantastic. The other part of that for us is the digital capability outside of the staff working environments, in terms of supporting people in care homes to stay in touch with their loved ones as well. So our team has actually had some support around that in terms of directing some funding for care homes to make sure that they had enough technology available for people to stay in touch. As I described earlier, the community response was really effective. The neighbourhoods networks came together with the support of our third sector colleagues, and we pulled all that together, and again instrumental in the response to COVID. So it was a huge lesson learned, and we continue to develop on that going forward. We identified that our resources are agile and flexible. They rose to the challenge. We all had to do new tasks. Some were redeployed into completely different working areas and working practices. And that just goes to show the workforce that we have in the region. Co-production, as I've described, including volunteers, carers, citizens, that is progressing. As I described earlier on in the pandemic, it was very difficult to do some of that work because we were moving at such a pace. But now we know it's instrumental in us moving our services forward. And in terms of integrated service delivery, our staff have all pulled together the relationships we've previously built on and developed to move forward. Is just going to improve our integration further as we move forward. And I'd like to stop there at that point, and I'm open to any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Kelly, for that. Whistle stop. That's brilliant. Thank you. Right, any questions on the part of Kelly? Kelly. Okay, Chris, you have your hand up.
On the recovery board, are there any minutes or any sort of write up about what you actually, how you were achieving it, and on what sort of a timescale agenda you have on it? Just for information for us to see. That's all I'd like to see.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So every meeting we minute everything, and we've got action logs of all the things we're delivering. Each of the work streams has a project plan, and I say project plan loosely. Some of them are very well detailed, some of them are works in progress. We have presentations brought to every meeting of the achievements and the next steps that are taken. So yeah, I have all the information on that. If you'd like to see more detail, I can certainly try and prepare something for you and give you an example of the type of work that's going on in the recovery board.
Just to know, what I'd like to see is an overview on what you're actually doing, not the detail of it, just the overview about how you would, what steps you're taking in each of the 4 priorities. Thank you.
No problem at all.
Thank you, Chris. Paxton, you have your hand up.
No, Chairman. A couple of questions. One is quite specific in some ways, and the other one is not so much so. Obviously, from what you said, the RPB has been very successful in terms of what it's done and what it's achieved, and obviously we need to ensure that working together continues. I don't know whether you felt that there's been any conflict as far as the PSB is concerned, or whether they've been working closely with them. And that's obviously a situation that we've been looking at for some time in terms of cooperation. And as a scrutiny panel, I think we would be saying that we haven't seen as much cooperation at PSB level as we would like, but obviously we have within the RPB. So that was a sort of general sort of question. And more specifically, you talked a lot about carers there and the work that you need to be doing with carers. How successful do you think we are in finding all the carers? Mm-hmm. And to what extent do you have that problem, and how you're trying to solve that, I think? No
problem. Shall I answer, Chair? Yeah.
Please.
So in terms of the RPB and the PSB, I'm currently in ongoing conversations with the leads for the PSBs of both Niperton and Swansea, not least around the wellbeing assessments that we've got to do over the next financial year. So we've got to do a population needs assessment as directed by Welsh Government in the Social Services and Wellbeing Act, as are the PSB going to do their wellbeing assessments. I think it was Healthier Wales that came through. So we are starting to rework together more closely. During the pandemic, I have to say, it was a little bit distant because we were both getting on with our pieces of work. But we are trying to make sure that there are the overlaps. We work out who is delivering what, because there are some overlaps in terms of population health and in terms of health and social care. So in terms of conflict, I have to say personally, in terms of the work that I have to do with the leads for the PSBs, I haven't come across any conflicts myself. I couldn't comment further, unfortunately.
Thank you, Kelly. Any more questions?
Can I come back there for a second?
Yeah.
I think, Clive, you're chairing the PSB at the moment, aren't you?
No, Councillor Lewis, Andrew Lewis is chairing.
Yes, it's moved on. My apologies. But I don't know if you have any views on it.
Yeah, well, listen, I mean, it's interesting. I will comment on a couple of things that Kelly mentioned, particularly in terms of communications and around carers and partners. I think it's worth reflecting that it's over a year now, isn't it, since COVID started, and if we knew then what we know now, we might have done things a little bit differently. I think it's fair to say, and I think Kelly's tried to outline that. And one of the things was, at the time when this all started, was the speed at which we needed to work to make those quick decisions. I don't know if you all recall about the situation, particularly regarding things like PPE. And I have to say, Paxton, hand on heart, that the driving force for bringing most of this together was the RPB and not the PSB. I think you find that the PSB during certainly the first 2 months of the COVID crisis, it was the RPB that was driving all this, mainly because of the really established relationships, stronger relationships, if I'm being honest, with health and Neath Patal, but particularly so that we had adopted this on a regional basis. So I'm just being honest here that in terms of the profile of both structures, it was the RPB that definitely led the way rather than a public service board. But as Kelly said, going forward, it's trying to establish that role that the PSB undertakes in terms of well-being and their agenda in terms of creating a better environment, those sorts of issues, and making sure it doesn't overlap with the RPB. But certainly, I was still vice chair of the Public Service Board, and during those early stages where it was critical that we met regularly, making quick decisions to make sure we got the best possible response in place for the region, it was the RPB that was making most of those decisions.
I think, Clive, looking at things from outside in that sense, one of the few positives that has come out of this pandemic is the way that the council and the health board in particular work together on this, basically through the RPB. And I think we've got to make sure that we continue to have that relationship working strongly for the benefit of the people of the area. It's as simple as that. Now, whether that comes through the PSB, whether it comes through the RPB, but whatever grouping it is or amalgamation of that, we have to be ensuring that we maintain that cooperation, I think.
I absolutely 100% agree with you, Paxton. I mean, one of the things that that we brought in was obviously the integrated role that Helen St John undertakes. You know, that was crucial, really. The timing of all that, along with Amy, you know, made that better working absolutely far more sustainable. Ability again to make those quick decisions from that from a health and council perspective. So, you know, politically, I'll say here and now that, you know, more integrated working is certainly that's something that we aspire to. And, you know, I don't know if the panel are aware, but in terms of the RPB leadership now, there's been a change, and Councillor Rob Jones has stood down a few weeks ago, certainly at the last meeting, and Emma has taken over that role. Emma Wallett, the chair of the Swansea Bay University Health Board, and I've taken over the vice chair. So I'm very much looking forward to pursuing that integrated relationship, which I think, you know, we can build on. It's probably taken it's been a long time coming, but we are getting there, and it's something I absolutely 100% agree with you that we need to continue.
Thank you,
Okay. Just one other question, if I may, because I will come back to it now, because I did talk about carers and identifying carers and the problems associated with that.
Yeah, are you ready, Chair? Should I reply?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So in terms of the Carers Partnership Board, they're actually developing carers liaison forums, and they've had a number of co-production sessions about how we identify carers to come forward to try and help us build the strategy, build the framework going forward. So in terms of identifying them, we are working with other carers to help us identify other carers, to bring more and more into the system to help us develop services or to develop the way forward, if you like. Is that helpful?
Yeah, thank you, Kelly. I know that's a topic that is close to my heart, carers, because we do tend to rely on them an awful lot. Any more questions for Kelly? Paxton, you've got your hand still up.
Sorry, Chairman, I'll take it down now.
Thank you. Any more questions for Kelly before she goes on to the second part? Okay, Kelly, over to you.
No problem, thank you. Bear with me, it's not presenting.
This is the Wales Audit Office report now.
Can you see that now? Sorry.
Yes.
Perfect. So there is actually only one slide that I've developed for the Wales Audit Office report, because it was back in autumn 2020. So you'll remember that we were Western Bay prior to March 2019, where we would disaggregate, where we had the disaggregation of the Bridgend population from our current health board footprint, from ABMU, good grief, I'd forgotten the title of it then, from ABMU into the Cwmtaf Health Board. And as a result of that, we created West Glamorgan, because obviously the Bridgend Council left our partnership and moved into the Cwmtaf-Morgannwg partnership. So overall, the findings were favourable for the way in which we managed our integrated care fund, but there were a number of recommendations that were to be taken forward by the region. By January 2019, we'd actually implemented all of those recommendations. So we put together a report back then. We reviewed and developed them and have implemented them, and they continue to be embedded to this day. And I've detailed all of the recommendations into the report, along with the actions we took against them.
Okay, thank you. One hand up. It's Tony Beddoes.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. First of all, apologies for being late. I had usual technical difficulties getting in. So I'm sorry if I'm not quite up to date where you are with the agenda, but I hope these points are within what you're dealing with, Kelly. The first is in terms of remodelling the acute care and community care services, which I think was referred to in one of the reports. Do you see any new components coming into that? I'm thinking particularly of, for example, a 24-hour flying domiciliary care service that can get to homes fairly quickly if summoned by a paramedic or a GP or a social worker and so on. The second thing is in terms of the, if you like, the dynamics of integrated care across professional and situational boundaries. What research and academic input are we drawing upon in order to find the things that help make that work better, rather than get in the way of it happening, in terms of the structural, legal, financial, and other difficulties? And I mean, for example, there's a whole lot of stuff about network theory that might apply, that's relevant in there, if this is a production network or an information sharing network or a combination of both. And then the final thing is, in terms of the business assurance group, I wonder if it's possible to see 2 examples of the reports that they've done, so give us an idea of what they get up to.
Apologies, I was writing that down then. So in terms of the domiciliary care, unfortunately, I'm not unable to answer that question as it stands today, so I'd have to go away and do some investigation. As far as I'm aware at the moment, there isn't anything necessary to develop that, but I need to check with my statutory partners, because it could be that they're doing something locally rather than across the region, so I need to just do a bit of investigation. In terms of integrated care dynamics, we have a research, innovation and improvement network within Wales now, which has been developed by the Transformation Programme. So I have a couple of officers working on investigating what else has happened across the world, across Wales, and they share best practice. We are doing some of that investigation work about what works well. So I've currently got them looking at what's gone on down in Somerset at the moment, because obviously they've just developed a new integrated way of working. How does that work for them? Would it fit our geography? All of that sort of stuff. So we do some research. We also work with Swansea University as a partner as well in various elements of the programme to help shape that forward. And we do take some expert advice from external organisations who deal with things as well. So I'm not sure if that answers your question fully, but we do look to other places and see what they have done as best practice and see whether it's appropriate for our population. Obviously, they're very different.
Okay. I mean, just to come back on the first one first. I mean, I use domiciliary care, 24-hour domiciliary care as the example. But I mean, there are other bits and facets of what you might call major reorganisation of the way the care system as a whole operates. So, I think that's something to look at. In terms of the dynamics of interagency cooperation, would the term boundary spanner mean anything to you?
No, apologies, no, it doesn't.
Well, it basically refers to individuals who, by their experience and their bearing and the way they are situated in the organisation, can work across professional boundaries and can work across organisational boundaries, and are empowered to do that by the way the organisations involved support them and recognise them. It's one example of network theory. I mean, if you've been working with academics in Swansea, I'm just a little surprised they haven't shared that gem with you, so you've got one for free today. Whether it's very good or not is for you to judge, but we'll see.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I guess that I see my role as that, as spanning the boundaries, because I work as based in Swansea Council, but actually I work for all the organisations, including the third sector, in the role that I do. So I suppose it's the theory part of it that I wasn't aware of, but I kind of do that role.
Welcome to the world of boundary spanners. Welcome to the world of boundary spanners.
I'll be looking that up. That'll be part of my research piece. And then you asked about the business assurance group reports. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they are minuted. So it's the legal and financial group. So they get together regularly to make sure that we're spending appropriately, that we do the due diligence and all of the organisations that we work with, etc., and make sure we get value for money and all of those things as well. So yeah, I can certainly share with you some of their minutes.
Excellent.
Thank you, Terry. And I remind panel members that Liz has circulated the Wales Audit Report and has listed questions on page 17 that Scrutiny should be asking. In the meantime, Amy.
Hi, I'm not sure if it's appropriate for me to come in now, but I thought I'd just sort of half answer one of the questions actually that Tony just raised as well, in terms of the statutory partners' involvement in some of those sort of remodelling care approaches. And I think it's just some assurance and some forward look as well in terms of the work we're doing through our transformation plans as adult services, also picking up again the commissioning reviews and then the recovery boards that Kelly's mentioned, the recovery groups, so transforming complex care. We're looking at all this work at the moment, and we don't want to miss an opportunity to really look at all aspects of appropriately remodelling the care from lessons learned from this year. So that's work that you'll see coming through scrutiny in the next year as well.
Thank you, Amy. Are there any more questions? Tony, you've still got your hand up.
Sorry, Chair, I can't find a way of putting it down at the minute, but
Okay.
Yeah. Chair, if there's no more questions, because I can just make a quick comment.
Yes, by all means.
Yeah, it's very brief, but very important. I'll always take these opportunities, and I don't think we should ever forget that, the gratitude that we owe to our social care sector, and this meeting is no exception. But I do want to take the opportunity on this occasion to thank Kelly for all of her hard work doing this during the pandemic and in the last year. I think the reports that she's presented speak volumes, really, and that it's not only been a reactive approach to the coronavirus crisis that the RPB have undertaken, but during all that work, we've managed to carry out some hugely significant pieces of work which will benefit all, a lot of our residents that rely on adult social care, particularly as a way of getting through their days, weeks, months and years. So Kelly, you've done a brilliant job again. I think it speaks for itself. And again, on behalf of adult social care, thanks very much for everything you've done.
Thank you, Clive. Okay, are there any more questions before? Okay, are you all content that we've covered these topics, and can we take them off the work plan for future planning? I take the silence that you're supporting that. Is that
Yes,
okay?
Yes. Yes.
Great. Sweet. Right, at this time, Clive, are you prepared for Tony to ask the question that he wanted to do prior because he wasn't here?
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I'm most grateful. It's not that I wasn't here, it's that I wasn't connected.
Right.
But there we are. It was just, in a sense, a matter arising from the last minutes to do with the budgeting, Clive, and you're maybe familiar with the ongoing debate I tend to pursue about the difference between budgets and allocations. And I was at a different event with the leader a couple of weeks ago, and he said that we were now moving to using outcome budgeting for our services. And I was slightly surprised to hear that, because I haven't heard those terms discussed in this scrutiny panel when we've been discussing budgets and allocations. So I just wondered if you could give us an example of the sorts of outcomes that are emerging. I understand all the context in which we're operating of COVID and so on, and that has to have priority. But if the leader and no doubt others are thinking now in outcome terms, what would be the outcomes, particularly in the sense of integrated care systems and what we've learned, that you might be thinking of hitching to this coming round of converting allocations into budgets?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, really, isn't it? I know we've talked about budgets, different forms of budgeting over the last couple of years, and I know zero-based budgeting was doing the rounds at one time, and these sorts of things. So the term outcomes budgeting is again, it probably can mean different things to different people. So I wasn't in the meeting with a leader, so I'm not sure. But for me, outcome budgeting is really important in terms of that. It's really important that we allocate our resources in the best possible way to achieve the best possible outcomes. And I know those are words, so I'll try and give some examples of where I see that going, Tony. So, really fundamental for me going over the next year, and this is probably my first full year, the co-production element of identifying the right types of measures and right types of activity and initiatives going forward is crucial. Kelly touched on it. I don't know if you were in the meeting, but the work that's still carried on in terms of co-production and adopting a co-production strategy with our partners, our carers groups, our networks is really important in developing the initiatives that we're going to see through the year. And I know I've asked Amy, Helen, and Dave to work up, with the additional resource of funding that we've got this year, real terms cash increase, what some of those will look like going forward. But in terms of some of the things that are ongoing at the moment, for me, some of the examples of the things that we're already doing would be around, common access point, for example, would be around, when we respond to a resident through the common access point, then how are we able to deal with their situation so that the situation is resolved for them and they don't come back into the council, within, 6 months or 12-month period. And those sorts of measures, will help us to understand whether a common access point system and the response that we're given is actually, meets the needs of our residents. Reablement is another area where, we need to look at. The emphasis is still very much on in terms of keeping people as independent as possible, not in a care home environment. And again, it's when people come out of hospital, for example, what are we able to provide them? Are we able to provide them with a safe environment that doesn't necessitate domiciliary care, or can we review the domiciliary care where they're having it and reduce that so that they're in an environment which is independent and something that's meets their needs going forward. And I suppose the other example that I would that came up today, again, I'm not sure if you were on the meeting, is about that constant review. So that hospital to home initiative that Kelly talked about, that she mentioned that we were going to review that and look at absolutely the best way of ensuring that meets the needs of our residents. So again, it's that resource, that finance, absolutely working to the best outcomes for our people. So that's really where I see it going to. And I don't know if that answers your question, and we can do a bit more work about and bring some of the things that we're thinking about in terms of initiatives going forward to another meeting. But that's where I am with outcome budgeting.
Chair, that's very helpful. I mean, from what I take from Clive's explanation, it seems to be that we're suggesting that we can look at a number of different sorts of outcomes. I mean, you mentioned the process of co-production as a process in itself that might be an outcome you want, irrespective of what it leads to. There might be a need to look at some of the measures of increased health and well-being as an outcome, either in specific locations or in specific target groups or whatever. I mean, I think it's a very rich area for discussion, and I'm just trying to encourage us, all of us, to have that debate about what are the outcomes we want and what are the different sorts that would be of value. I mean, if the customers, if the service users and their carers and their families feel that their respect for the service has gone up and that they're getting the services they and their relatives need, that in itself might be one of the valid outcomes. It doesn't necessarily mean that we've treated more people or provided a better service, but it's a different sort of outcome.
Absolutely. And
I just think we just need to, it'd be very interesting to spend what time we can afford to get our minds around that and explore it a bit more. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. I'm sure Liz is taking note of that. And thank you, Clive, for answering Tony's question. We go on now to item number 7, which is next meeting, and that's on the update of how Council's commitments translate to adult services and Wales Audit Office front door to adult service care recommendations and impact on preventative services. And that's on April the 20th at 4 o'clock. So if there's no more, thank you very much for attending.
Okay, bye everyone.
Thanks all.
Thank
Good
you.
night, everyone.
Yeah, well done, Sue.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Well,
Bye. Thank you, Kelly.
bye.
All right, Les. Okay. Tony, he's having problems.